The following is a conversation with Matt Koohkan, a student at the University of Alberta, former Student Union Chief Returning Officer at U of A, and the co-founder of the New Blue Generation. We delved into the fusion of psychological insights with political leadership, reflected on his immigrant journey to political activism, and the challenges and triumphs of advocating for students and conservative values. From navigating the student union's intricacies to inspiring the next wave of leaders, our conversation covers the breadth of his impact and aspirations. Conversations about politics are always tricky. They require a lot of preparation and accuracy from the speaker side and an open mind and patience from the listener side. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Dear friends, this is Amir Bilari Podcast, and here is Matt Koohkan. Okay, you're pursuing psychology while also having a career in the field of politics. So, is there any connection with them? How are you trying to connect these two and use the knowledge you take in university to apply in everyday life?
Yeah, with psychology, some people always think it's very distinct from politics, but the way I look at it is based on my experiences. It's always been kind of an interplay, a dance between the mind and the people you surround yourself around with, the people you interact with on a daily basis. Think about like some political leaders, how they can affect you without really doing much. They say a word or two and it remains with you for like years to come. Charismatic leaders. That's psychology at play. I think psychology does have a big role in the decisions you make on who you vote to. The voter mood, for instance, what they think, their ideals. It all plays into all of this. But of course, it's not just individual psychology. You have a community psychology too that you have to consider. Let's say if you want to engage politically. And this is not just for politics. In any community leadership position, when you engage with a community, you need to consider the community you're engaging with. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So me being in psychology, of course, kind of helps me understand that. Who am I talking to? What group am I engaging with? What are their needs? And overall, it's pretty connected.
How do you think... Well, leadership is a critical aspect of being in any form of team management, whether it's governance or politics itself. What are the necessary traits that a leader has to have in order to be able to manage a team properly?
When it comes to politics and just general leadership positions, I think the biggest thing you need to consider is authenticity, especially in politics. I think it's very different in politics than it is, let's say, in a student governance management position, let's say. Because in politics out there, let's say you want to be a public servant and represent the people, what people value the most is authenticity. And the number one rule to be successful out there is to be authentic. Be yourself, but also secondly, communicate those ideas well enough. Because let's say as a leader, you may have good ideas, but if you don't have a good way to communicate that with your audience, then you immediately fail in even starting and going down the path you want to go to. Thirdly, you need to know, in my experience at least, how to assign roles, let's say. I've done management, not just in politics, I've done management in various positions. And it's important to understand who you assign where. I think every human being has a very great potential in different areas, but you need to understand as a leader where they will thrive. And I think that's also very important in governments. Let's say when a government is elected, let's say in Alberta, the premier has to select a cabinet, or the prime minister needs to select his cabinet or her cabinet. And it's very important who you put where, because if you mess it up, and if you put people who are incompetent in positions that they should not be in, you will have a situation where you lose public opinion, you lose your own path, and you lose any path you have for success, which I see in Ottawa at the time. That's just my opinion.
Yes, the difference I have found with team management in politics and team management mostly any other scenario is that when you're going toward a path, let's say you're the leader of a team, you make a decision, that decision turns out to be wrong. Okay, it's okay, we'll learn from the mistake, now we fix it, and that's part of the path. But with politics it's different. Any mistake can prove that you are incompetent. Not prove, let's say, starts the wave of acknowledging the people who are supporting you and also opposing you as the incompetent leader. So how do you, as a person who is involved with student politics, who is involved in politics in greater scale and has a say, let's say, in today's Canada's politics, how do you think a political leader can manage still staying valid as a leader and yet admit the fact that, okay, this was a mistake, now we're going to go better?
I think I agree, like with political leaders, let's say with political leaders in provincial level or federal level, any mistake you make is going to be criticized heavily. But I think that's something that every member who wants to be an elected member needs to consider. There's a very, very high standard that is expected of you. In my personal opinion, there's almost no room for error, because any error you make as a political elected member affects millions of people, sometimes thousands, sometimes millions of people. And that is why you get heavy criticism on each side. And of course, the issue you have to, not issue, but the situation we have here in Canada, it's a very polarizing situation. It's either many people identify with, let's say, the right side of the spectrum, and many people identify with the left side of the spectrum. And there is almost no room for proper conversations on each side. So it's almost become a gotcha moment when, exactly, let's say, one side gets something wrong, and you're like, see, I told you, you're incompetent. And do I think that's necessarily accurate? No. But do I think if a politician is making one error, okay, it's human, you make a mistake. Two, sure. But if you're making one mistake after another, that's not mistake, that's incompetence. And again, going back to my personal opinions, I see that with, let's say, our current prime minister. He makes a mistake, cool. Another scandal after scandal after scandal, it's incompetence. And to answer the question of what makes somebody valid in this kind of environment we're all in, I think it's to be authentic with your own people, and don't try to gaslight them about what's really happening. I don't know how much you follow, like, federal politics, for instance, but Prime Minister Trudeau started very popular in 2015, and so far he's been going down and down and down, and right now he's about to lose around 150, 60 seats. Conservatives, if election held today, are about to hold the largest majority in Canadian history. This is not just an act of luck. It's not just people being mad. It's the idea that they don't think that their leader is relevant, but is no longer connecting with them. Because Canadians today see, let's say, they're struggling. 60% of Canadians, by the end of the month, are $200 away from bankruptcy. That was a statistic from around December. When Canadians are struggling and they're saying they're struggling, but suddenly they see their leader saying, no, everything is great, there's this big disconnect. So I think to be valid or to be relevant, you need to relate to your own people. You can't abandon them and think things are going to be great for you.
Meanwhile, in quotation, your people, that's technically half of the population, let's say approximately half of the population, and as the leader of a country, you ought to care, not only care, but put all your effort to make decisions that benefits everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the decision you have to make on behalf of 30 million people.
Yeah.
So how do you think that can be managed, even if, regardless of who is in the power, whether it's the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party, it's always an arm wrestle that feels like never ends. So,
well, what I think the way I look at it is I'm in not an elected position, so I'm seeing this as a judgment myself. I believe once you're elected, you become the leader of the people, not the leader of the Liberals, not the leader of the Conservatives. You become the leader of the people. And as long as you govern as the leader of the people, you govern policy-based rather than ideology-based, you propose decent policy out there, you will not just maintain the support you initially had, but you could also get some support from, let's say, voters who were kind of on the fence with you in the prior. But I agree, like, let's say when I say your people, the day you're elected, your people becomes a country as a federal prime minister. By the day you're elected, your people becomes the premier, as the Premier of Alberta. And if you govern based on policy, if you govern with reason, the people will grow to like you. Of course, you're going to have some voters who are just never going to like you. They're going to hate you no matter what. You can bring heaven and earth down to them. You can bring hell to them. They will either hate you or love you. But there's always room to bring people on your side as long as you govern with reason. And that's something we don't see federally at the moment. I'm just going to hate on Trudeau as much as I can.
No, that's fair. It's okay. We're supposed to talk about our other opinions here, right? So, I want to talk about your background. You come from an immigrant family from Iran. How was the process of adapting to Canada's culture? Because I'm assuming, as another fellow Persian, there are two different cultures. And at the same time, how did it affect your political perspective?
It's pretty cold here, isn't it? Sometimes. Yeah, we moved to Canada when I was 6 years old. We moved from Iran. And I remember we moved to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Great place. Love it. November of 2010, 2009, negative 40 degrees. I remember the day I landed, I was like, oh boy, this is a cold place. And to be honest with you, it was easy for me to adapt at the time because of how young I was. It wasn't the same path or same journey my parents had at the time, but it was definitely an easier journey for me. And going from a very different culture, going from a very different school system to Canada, obviously a big culture shock for me. But especially in Saskatchewan, I don't know if you've ever been, but they have one of the nicest people you can ever meet in your life. Very welcoming people. And I was immediately welcomed into that community, into Canada, by those people, by my teachers, students who didn't even know me. And that really helped. And as time went by, my family owned a small business in Saskatoon, did fairly well at the time, did okay. And any average small business owner would say you have your good days, you have your bad days. As years went by, around, let's say when I gained my mature consciousness, around 2016, 2017, 2018, as years went by and I would reflect back to other newcomers, things weren't as easy for them. I wouldn't say things were easy for us, but things were more adaptable for us. And when I would look at newcomers who were just joining, it wasn't the same process. Things were getting harder and harder and harder, not just from Iran, from around the world. 2019 hits. You have newcomers who come to Canada, and they weren't, let's say, able to easily adapt to the country, not because of a fault of their own, but things were becoming more unaffordable and more unaffordable as years went by. Buying a house was becoming more unaffordable. Buying a car, tuition becoming unaffordable. And that kind of flipped a switch with me that I was like, okay, when we first came here, sure, things weren't easy, but in my opinion, Canada was a place where if you put your mind into it, you put some hard work into it, and you invest in the place will give it back to you. You will do just fine. You'll have a house, have a family, get by just comfortably enough to make ends meet. But things got worse and worse for people around us, and that kind of got me engaged politically. which of course took me to the conservative side of the aisle.
Yes.
Winston Churchill has a quote. They say, if you're young and not a liberal, you don't have a heart. But if you're old and not a conservative, then you don't have a brain. So that's kind of how things evolved for me.
I see. I'm trying to see how I can formulate my question. What do you think helped you the most as... What do you think helped you the most as a person who came here when you was 6 years old? I'm sure there was a language barrier, and the school system was different. So, what do you think helped you the most when you got here and you felt that, okay, now I feel at home?
Honestly, it was the community. It was definitely the community I entered in Saskatoon. Without that community, there was no way I would have adapted as earlier and be comfortable as fast as I did. As I said, the day we were in, and I was in the public school system, Victoria School in Saskatoon is what they call it. The teachers, very friendly people. The community, very welcoming. And I kind of give part of that to the fact that Canadians had a more peaceful life, that they were able to give that peace back to the community. When I look around me right now, I sense more aggression and more tenseness in our community. And I don't blame Canadians for that. They're going through hard times. And I don't think if I moved from Iran to Canada today as a 6-year-old, I would have the same experience. I mean, you know how hard it is to move to a different country. But at the time, I think the peace within the community really resonated back to me. It almost was a sense of confidence, because I would talk to, let's say, my teacher, and the teacher would be, oh, you're in Canada, everything is going to be okay. And that confidence resonates with you, but that confidence is no longer here. So I would say community was the biggest factor in allowing me to kind of make myself comfortable here.
I see. It makes sense. And okay, on the continuum of you starting to become interested in politics, in University of Alberta, you became the science counselor at the student union, and the following year you became the chief returning officer. How was that experience like?
Underwhelming. As a counselor, yes. And the SU is probably not going to like the fact that I said that.
I'm loving the just the small hints of unsatisfaction.
Things were better then than they are now. I think that's just a famous saying for everything. Things were better back then than they are now. I became a science counselor. It was a good experience. You do get involved with a lot of advocacy that's localized to your faculty, which I think was important for anyone to consider who want to do student politics, is make your goals achievable and small. Because a lot of people who do student politics right now, I look at them and I'm like, that's a very stupid promise you're making to your constituents. And it's not fair, because your voters sometimes may not be aware that you can't achieve that. And yet you still promise it. So it was, and when I say underwhelming is because I thought I could do more as a counselor, but if you go ask any counselor today, they can say that it's underwhelming.
I see.
This is nothing against the SU, it's just a reality of the situation. And go ahead. But the following year I became the CRO, the Chief Returning Officer of the Students' Union. I think it was one of the more fun aspects of the Students' Union and more rewarding, because in the end of the day, your job as the CRO is to just maintain the sanctity of democracy in a more smaller institution that represents 30,000 people. And that job for me was rewarding, because I got to saw candidates contest positions such as a presidency and VP External and Student Life, and get them to see debate, because I created the first presidential debate in the Students' Union. Some say that's a Middle Eastern tendency of mine. Maybe it was.
but it was fun. Maybe I also liked it because I'm Middle Eastern. Who cares?
And and in the end, people voted, and I think it was a more rewarding aspect of the Students' Union.
Mm-hmm. I see. student politics is formulated in a manner that I agree on the point you made about the fact that not everyone that get into it are aware of how the process is going to look like or how the system works. As a result, everyone thinks that they're a revolutionary person with this transforming ideology that's going to change everything. But then they come and they see that 98% of their efforts is just sustaining the system.
Yeah.
So how do you think that can be, first of all, communicated from student union to students and the potential candidates? And how do you think students who are trying, the aspiring student leaders who are trying to get into student union to learn that?
I think it's a responsibility for both parties. It's not just a responsibility for the SU, but it's a responsibility of the students who want to get involved as well, to kind of analyze the role you're in. I believe there should be more transparency with what the Students' Union does. And again, I believe they do a good job. I think Students' Union should exist, like such as the U of A, because it creates a community for our students, which is pretty important. But I think what should be communicated well is the idea that just because what we do is not, let's say, this big, massive idea we have, it doesn't mean that it's something small. Because in the end of the day, Students' Union does have an effective role in governance advocacy, such as VP External right now is Chris Beasley. I believe recently Abdul Abbasi got elected to that role. That's a significant role. They get to interact with the government of Alberta on a not daily, but on a regular basis to try to get some stuff done. For instance, Chris, I believe, was able to do some good stuff while he was the VP External when it comes to like fundings and stuff. Same thing with VP Student Life. There are things you can do, but I think unfortunately some people overlook to things that can be done and kind of aim to things that are way out of their purview. And that is something we saw this election for sure.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the recent election for the student union executives, I'm trying my best to use PG-13 words.
That's right. That was interesting.
Very chaotic things happened.
That was interesting.
Let's. Okay, I don't like naming individuals, but could you please give some context on why the presidential the president-elect was disqualified by the student union CRO?
You know, everything about this election was chaotic. Everything was chaotic, and that's okay. Like, democracy's messy. I don't understand the notion that an election should be just this very smooth process. Democracy works when people get involved. Sometimes things get heated. It's important to kind of remind yourself that in the end of the day, as candidates, you want what's best for what you're running for, right? Maybe we all have different approaches, but the goal is the same. You want what's best for the union or for whatever you're running for. Now, the presidential race was a bit of a messy one. I don't want to, again, name individuals, but I think the CRO made a judgment, and this judgment was based on the bylaws that we are given as CROs. When I was a CRO, there's strict bylaws we have in the Students' Union that kind of allows us to make judgments as we see fit. Mm-hmm. If I recall correctly, it's called Bylaw 320, where certain rulings can be made on the disqualification of the candidate. Mm-hmm. And the CRO decided that the president-elect should be disqualified because, in his opinion, there were newly surfaced evidence, again, in his opinion, that showed that. What are these issues? Now, I know a lot of students were wondering, like, what constitutes disqualification? In this case, the concern I believe the CRO had in the elections office, based on what I read on his ruling, is third-party involvement. When I was a CRO, I made it explicitly clear to all of our candidates that third parties cannot get involved with elections, third parties cannot campaign, third parties cannot endorse. Upon doing so, you have to distance yourself from them.
Can you define third parties?
Third parties could be student groups.
Okay.
Third parties could be anyone who is not the candidate. Individuals are not third parties. groups are third parties. So I believe that was the judgment the CRO made. That's why he decided to disqualify President-elect. And again, democracy gets messy. The CRO made his judgment in his capacity, and President-elect disagreed with it and took it to the DI board, and now it's up to them to decide what goes on.
Can you give some context on what the DI board does?
Absolutely. So the way the student union functions is, and I think this is important for people to know, people were a bit pessimistic on the students' union this year, and I think that's slightly unfair, because even though, as I said, democracy is messy sometimes, there are good mechanisms installed in the SU to allow a fair, trial. Let's say if a CRO is making a ruling, which in this case they did, whoever they ruled upon has the right to appeal this to the DI board. The DI board is basically the court of the students' union. It's composed of, I believe, law students, most of them, who have really no connection to anybody in the SU. All they care about is come there, look at the facts, make a judgment, make a ruling, and move forward. And that is what the president-elect, I guess, appealed. She believes that nothing done there was wrong, which again is within her right. And now it is up for the DI board, the court of the students' union, to make that decision. The DI board can either sustain the CRO's ruling, which would mean that the president-elect is no longer the president-elect, or the DI board can overturn the CRO's ruling. It's up to them.
Can I ask what happens after? Can I ask what happens if the president-elect is disqualified by the DI board?
Well, if the president-elect decides that, if the DI board decides that the president-elect is disqualified, it all depends on how things play out. And I mean, I don't want to insinuate anything, but it depends. Is there a candidate in the race who's going to take over? Is it going to be, the DI board can make a recommendation to council, students' council, that, let's say, you need to create a nomination committee and you elect the president. Like, it's a very messy process that even I'm hesitant to say what's going to happen, because it's either the second person can take the realms of SU power, or council may create a committee and make an election, or a new election could be called. Like, all of these are the realms of possibility. The DI board can decide anything they want to decide.
And who is the person that decides which strategy to go forward? Is it the DI board?
It's the DI board. The DI board is made of, I think, 6 or 7 tribunes, so
Okay.
6 or 7 judges. They hear the case out, and they make a ruling. The ruling is done in private, and they make a ruling on how to approach, and they give a path forward. The DI board is basically who you go to when you don't know what to do. And again, I think this is a very normal process, and I think students are in good hands with whatever the DI board is about to decide.
I see. Given that this happened, what do you think should be done in the upcoming years to prevent a similar scenario, or technically scenarios that question the student union's integrity?
I think communication is important. I think, unfortunately, a lot of things that happened in this election were not well communicated to the student body. As a former CRO, let's say when I read the students' union's statement about what's going on, I was able to connect the dots and say, okay, this is what's happening. We just need to wait for the DI board, etc., etc. But this needs to be considered by people within the SU that, frankly speaking, not many people are that engaged with the SU. Our voter turnouts are embarrassing.
Yes, they're bad.
Right. They're low, and that is not the CRO's fault. That's just how students feel about the SU. If you see that, okay, students are not really supporting you that much, you need to communicate well, especially when there is issues like this, that, okay, we disqualified candidate A because here's why. This is the process that's going to take place. Like, I'm sure could be one person in the SU who would have come down and said, guys, this disqualification is not the end. The candidate could appeal. I don't think the student body really knew about appealing until the candidate who got disqualified mentioned that they appealed, right? It's a communications problem. So suddenly when the students union starts disqualifying people, Sometimes for the right reasons. I'm not going to say which times. I do believe there are times where you do need to disqualify a candidate for violation of bylaws, okay? In the end of the day, you're not a child, you're a candidate running for positions. And there were candidates in this race who did violate bylaws. I'm not going to say again who, but they were. And I would even argue some disqualifications are valid. But you need to communicate that well. Why were these bylaws breached? And if you do communicate it that well, people could question the integrity. In the end of the day, your job is to not carry a PR campaign, is to uphold the law. As long as you uphold the law and you communicate that to your people and be consistent with it. When I was a CRO, I was very consistent with all my rulings and any issues that arise. If you actually look at the SU website, I'm probably the only CRO who never issued a fine. And that's because my approach was, these are students who are trying to get involved. They mean well. It can be resolved by just say, hey, this is wrong. This is why this is wrong. I could issue you this fine, but I'm not going to do it. Don't do it again. And I found that method to be very effective because I was serious enough with the candidate that said, hey, look, this can take you down. But also I kind of provided some wiggle room to understand that these are new people who, frankly, the SU is not the center of their world. And you need to kind of understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, let's get some distance from student politics and focus more on actual politics.
Thank God.
You have initiated a nonprofit organization called New Blue Generation that focuses on connecting conservative youth to prominent conservative leaders across the province, whether it's MLAs or MPs or campaign managers. How was the process of realizing the need for such an organization, and how did you start?
Yeah, we started the New Blue Generation with my friend Leo Huang, who is now the federal coordinator at the Campus Conservatives, in, I believe, April of last year, when we were in the provincial elections. One thing that led me to look into this matter was, I remember one day I'm looking over the poll made by a polling firm in Ontario, which showed 32% of voters from 18 to 29 are conservative. 28% are NDP, around 18% Liberal, and the remainder are the fringe parties.
Sorry, in Canada or Alberta?
In Canada.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In Alberta, that's probably way higher,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, if the majority of youth identify as conservatives today, then why are we not having them more involved? And the answer is easy, because politics can be intimidating sometimes, right? Even for me it was. When I first got engaged, I remember I had to email a member of parliament, and all I did say was, hey, I want to get engaged. What do I do? And he was very kind enough to kind of guide me the right path and go do volunteering and door knocking with candidates. I think that's how it began for me. And I realized not many people have that avenue, right? For some, politics is just what they see on TV. They don't realize how accessible it is. So we started this in the provincial election. I remember I was door knocking for a UCP candidate, Dr. Sherman, who's a great guy, in Edmonton Whitemud. And when we went door knocking, I noticed there's a lack of youth involved in those doors, but there is not a lack of youth conservatives. So it was obvious to me that there needs to be a group that mobilizes these people. Similarly, when we were door knocking for John Zadek, a great guy in Edmonton Castle Downs. Again, you have conservative youth, but you didn't see them really come out. So we took that opportunity. We said we need to be the bridge between conservative youth and elected members, campaigners, etc. I'm not a politician. I'm just connecting, basically, people. Mm-hmm. And it worked really well. We connected many members of our campus community to campaigns. We connected members across the province, sometimes places 6-7 hours away. There was this lovely woman who emailed me saying that she has 3 kids. They all want to get engaged, but they don't know how. So I connected them to their MLAs down south. Mm-hmm. And kind of doing this, it grew the movement to a point with us that, of course, we won the Next Generation Award by the United Conservative Party in their annual general meeting. But that was the whole goal, just to connect people. And we had the resources, which is conservative youth. We just needed that bridge. And I think we did an okay job at creating that.
How do you guys function? Basically, based on the fact that it's a non-profit, how do you guys how are you planning to sustain this organization, and how are you overall function on a daily basis?
See, unlike liberals, we're fiscally responsible. So, so you don't need money to really to.
I am not affiliated with the Conservative Party, by the way.
But unlike liberals, we are fiscally responsible. You got to realize that for this we didn't really need money. We just needed people. Mm-hmm. We needed a bridge of communication, emails, Google Forms, a website. I paid for the website myself at the time, and we just communicated and we connected these people. Later on, of course, the campus conservatives, the New Blue Generation folks joined us in the campus conservatives, and we kind of brought them all together, because I'm in the belief that it's better to have one large group than small silos around the province. So kind of one of my biggest goals was to go around the province and go up to the prominent conservative youth groups and say, look, you guys are doing a good job, but you're not going to achieve much with 10 people. You need to kind of bring it all together. So, yeah, fiscally, we manage it by less bureaucracy, I would say. We just got the job done.
As a, let's say, aspiring wouldn't be the right word, but as an individual who has been in the Conservative Party, a member of the Conservative Party for the last 5 years?
Around that time.
5 years? Okay. Where are the aspects you think the Conservative Party can improve, and especially youth can help improve?
One thing that, of course, it depends what Conservative Party you're talking about, right? You have two separate parties right now. You have the United Conservative Party of Alberta, and then you have the Conservative Party of Canada. Very distinct groups. But one thing that I believe, not improve on, but one thing that I think is an asset for us that we can work harder on as a movement is the youth portion of our voter base. This year, next year, once the Prime Minister decides that it's his time to get out of office or call an election, 4.5 million voters are going to be Gen Z.
Okay.
That's a very significant, I believe it's 4.5 million. That's a very significant portion of our voter base. So I think continuing, but also strengthening this youth movement within the Conservative Party is going to be the best asset for us down the road. I think the federal party is doing a great job at that. We have great campus communities across the country. We were phone calling, let's say, for Jamil Jawani. He just got elected as a member of parliament in Durham in Ontario. And there were members of our folks, members of Calgary Conservatives, who phone called for Jamil to, go out and vote, get out the vote. When you have a movement that is very organized, and when you have groups such as youth who are very energized, then you can do a lot of things. And that's something the Liberals knew back when they first got into power, back in the 2013, 2014 area, when they got in power 2015, but before that. They knew if they become popular with the youth, that can really boost the momentum. It can show them as more energetic. And I think the Conservative Party is doing that right now, federally and provincially too, because the Premier herself was the president of the Campus Conservatives in Calgary when she was a student. So she really understands the importance of youth in our I would say, in our movement. So that's one thing I would say that we just need to work on, is get more youth involved.
I understand. Considering that you are fascinated with the Liberal Party and their activities for the last 10 or so years.
Well, their incompetence is fascinating.
Can you still mend the case for them? Can you put yourself in their shoes and bring up, justifications on why they are having problems? I'm not as involved in politics as you are, but can you still make the case on why you think they're lacking on the points that you believe they're lacking?
I'll ask you a question. Could you justify, let's say I grabbed a lighter here and I'm burning your house down. Could you justify why I'm burning that house down? I don't think you can. And that's my same approach when it comes to the Liberal NDP government. Anything they do is either backfiring, anything they do is showing the opposite results as what they would, and it doesn't take much to understand that. I mean, for instance, housing. Right now, housing is a big problem in Canada. Like, when we first came to Canada, housing was fairly cheap. Now, to afford a home, let's say in Ontario and BC, you need, well, the average home in Canada is $700,000. The average income around $80,000 as a family, if I recall correctly. So what happened? And the Liberals, for instance, always say, well, housing is a provincial jurisdiction. The province and the city builds homes. The federal government kind of helps you. Sure. Which is not true necessarily. It's more complex than that. There's a federal crown corporation that manages your mortgages. There's a federal bank that basically not announces, but your interest rates are determined by federal policies. And one of the biggest reasons why, let's say today we're going through the housing crisis that we are, one of them is the uncontrolled and unreasonable rate of immigration that we had in this country in the last 5 years. On average, we welcomed around 500,000 people every year from 2018 all the way to 2022. In that time period, we built 200,000 homes every year. So we're bringing in 500,000 people, and then we're telling and immigration is a federal jurisdiction, right? We're bringing in 500,000 people with dreams, with goals, with aspirations, and then we tell the provincial governments, hey, build a home for these people. You're catching them off guard. So it evidently becomes a federal failure. So no, there's no way I can put myself in the shoes of the Liberals, because nothing they've done in the past has really made sense to me. Their carbon tax, one example. It's going up again by 23% in April 1st. They say it's, of course, to save the environment, but that's not true. It's more bureaucracy, what they're well known for. And it's leading to people not being able to afford anything. And I think that all goes back to the fact that they've passed their expiry date. They've passed their stay of welcome. And it's an unfortunate situation because they have forgotten who put them in power. They've retreated to their corners in Ottawa, and they think that that's the way they run it. A shoulder tap with a donor and a shoulder tap with another MP. Yeah, let's tax these people even more is going to help them. But it doesn't. It's nothing about them is reasonable. There would be one reasonable thing.
Okay.
If Justin should have resigned today, that would be very reasonable of him. I would appreciate that.
Who would you like to see from the Liberal Party to be as the MP? As the Prime Minister.
Oh, none. I mean, I wouldn't want anyone from the Liberals to be the Prime Minister for sure. I don't think any of them have the competence at the time to be. Who would I like to see as their leader? Because I don't think Trudeau is going to really be the leader after this election. He's gone through too much personally and professionally. He is probably the most hated man in the country, unfortunate for him. But I think there are some people in the federal Liberal Party who are kind of aiming for that leadership position. You have Housing Minister Sean Fraser. You have Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, who are really trying to be that relevant to be the next Prime Minister of Canada in their mind after Trudeau is defeated. Of course, I don't want to jinx it. We never know what happens, right? But at this time, I don't see anybody in that party, and I don't say this as a conservative. I say this as just somebody who looks at these people, and somebody who is pursuing psychology and understands the human mind a little bit. They cannot relate to average Canadians anymore. They've been there for far too long, and I don't see any of them being effective leaders. And I promise you this today, that once the election's held, the Conservatives will hopefully get a majority, and the Liberals will be scrambling looking for a leader, and whoever that leader becomes is going to be a placeholder for the next 10 years. until somebody else shows up. Nobody in the Liberal caucus will ever be the Prime Minister today. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the road, but not anytime soon.
I see. I wish I was more knowledgeable about politics today in Canada. I think we would have a more fun conversation. Let's talk.
It's never too late.
Next time. Round
yeah.
2. Let's talk about University of Alberta's conservatives. As the president of the U Alberta Conservatives, you have this responsibility to organize, not technically organize, but portray the image that the Conservative Party is trying to portray in the best way possible. And research shows that the majority of post-secondary institutions tend to be more leaning toward liberal, to the Liberal Party, or technically they're more leaning toward the leftist ideologies. What are the challenges of doing that then?
I don't think it's accurate to. There are insinuations that post-secondary institutions are more left-leaning, and even though in some post-secondary institutions that may be true, I would say you still have a very large number of student body that identify as conservatives. As I said, for instance, like right now we are leading the number of voters in Gen Z. I don't know if that's going to hold, but I think it will, and it's going to get stronger. But as the campus conservatives, I would say, I just became their president in January. It's a great group of people. I think we've signed up to 400 members overall since our initiation, I think back in 2019. And it's been growing and growing and growing. And our members, I would say, are not just a good portrayal of the conservative movement, but are a great portrayal. And a great group of people who I think the Conservative Party of Canada, the United Conservative Party of Alberta, or any Conservative Party in the country, I should be confident in who is taking the torch for the next generations. And of course, our job is to make sure that they have the environment they need to interact with their friends, to interact with these like-minded people, which is why we hold various events with members of parliament, MLAs. We go to tours around the legislature. We organize a lot of things, formally and informally, which gives these people the opportunity to pursue. For some, it's their aspirations. There are many people you talk to, and they're like, "Yep, I want to do politics." That's great. Some people are just curious to, be involved somehow while they're in school, and that's totally okay too. We foster for all of these groups, bring them all together, and create the environment they need to succeed tomorrow. Because let's say if in my group today you have a member who 10 years down the road wants to run for politics anywhere in Canada, our goal is to make sure that, okay, he is confident enough to call up a friend he made 10 years ago who is, let's say, now a staffer in the legislature, and say, hey, I want to run, could you help me? And they do it. And that's how most campus conservatives are. I mean, Pierre Poilievre himself was a University of Calgary conservative member with his friend, recently elected member of parliament, Shav Mujumdar, who just got elected in Calgary. Danielle Smith, the premier, she was the president of the University of Calgary conservatives. I believe they were called conservatives. They might have been called something else at the time. So I think our members do a great job at portraying it. And I'm very hopeful for where everyone in this group is going to go to, because I think it will be very, very good places.
Mm-hmm. What are the main missions for this year of U Alberta Conservatives that you're pursuing?
Right now we're expanding. I want us to go to Campus Saint-Jean and Augustana. So we tabled in Augustana, I think 2-3 weeks ago. We got more members signed up. Even the Camrose MLA, Jackie Lovely, who is a great representative for the Camrose constituency, and she's very popular there, showed up and assisted us in this. And we signed more members up, and we want to sign more members up in Campus Saint-Jean. But our main goal at this time is to host fun events, create a community for the campus conservative members to interact with friends, meet members of parliament, meet MLAs, meet anyone actually who is, involved in politics, and create opportunities for each other. It's like a networking thing. But besides that, one of my biggest goals is to create the foundation for the new federal election. Because once that federal election is called, I want to be, I will be, but I also want to be joined by our members at the doors, on the phones, door knocking for candidates in Edmonton. Because right now in Edmonton, we have 3 seats that are not conservative. And our goal is going to be to help these candidates to flip those. And I think 2 of them are very, very easy and possible. One of them will be a bit of a challenge, but shout out to, I forgot her name. She's also not that relevant, so.
Oh, man. I would really love to have you for a debate with a person who is more knowledgeable.
I would name somebody right now, but I don't want to.
Okay. Let's talk about the future. What are your personal and professional goals and aspirations for the next couple of years?
Right now, I'm just looking forward to graduate. I'm done this year, hopefully. Okay. And my goal is to hopefully enter law school. Exactly, hopefully enter law school.
Okay.
And just pursue a career in law. See where that takes me. That's kind of the basic of it. I don't have much other aspirations besides law school.
That's fair. How's the school going? How are you doing? How was your experience at U of A as a senior student?
As a senior student.
You're old.
Well, I mean, my experience at the U of A was very good. I joined here 2020, so 4 years ago. Hit COVID. Mm-hmm. Worst year. If any other pandemic ever comes up, I recommend everybody to drop out, or at least just hold off on 1 year. It's not worth it. I don't care what your parents say. Just hold off on that 1 year. So 1 year in the pandemic, really hard. Mm-hmm. But I was living in Lister here, and it was just fantastic. Like, great community, great sense of community. And I wasn't senior. I was 19. I'm just 21.
I'm kidding.
And it was a very good experience. I think a lot of times with university, there is this notion that I'm in for 4 years. And then from the outside perspective, it almost looks like that 4 years is prison for some. It's like, oh my God, it's 4 years of this. It's almost like nothing's happening those 4 years. But I would say the most eventful time of my life has been the last 4 years. If anyone's debating, I mean, joining the U of A, do it. Sure, our student selections are dirty and chaotic, but hey, we have a great campus community. And even though sometimes we can get chaotic, in the end of the day, we all come back together. Mm-hmm. So I would say the community has been fantastic for me.
You focused a lot on the sense of community.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is to have that sense of community for the next 10 years in Canada, considering that there are going to be new immigrants, there are going to be changes to the political system and the education system to some extent. The housing crisis is hopefully going to be over, but new crises are going to take place. So how do you think the community of Alberta in general and Canada can contribute to facilitating going through those situations?
I think as Canadians, or as, you and I have joined this country later on, one thing we need to realize all the time is how lucky we are at where we live. No matter the problems we go through, the institutions may be horrible. The government, federally, absolutely horrible. But the people, the core of the country is good. The soul of the country is good. And I think what's going to be important for us to all realize is governments come and go. Prime ministers come and go. Premiers come and go. We all come and go. What's going to matter in the end is how we contribute to the society we live in. And, I mean, one thing that I think we're blessed with is our immigration system. I mean, right now the system's horrible. Don't get me wrong. But the idea that we can bring in bright, smart, capable people to this country in thousands, really shows that if we managed our numbers properly, if we managed our resources properly, there is almost no limit to where this country can go to, because you have people who want to start something here. If given a fair shot by a fair government, there is great potential. And it's not just with immigrants. I mean, you have it with even the younger people who are growing up today. Things are hopefully going to be better for them than it is for us today. But even if it is good for them, one thing to realize is sometimes, unfortunately, when times are good, we create really bad times. And it's the whole idea that strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and bad times create the strong men. What I hope is to see that we're able to remember our past. Let's say 10 years down the road, we're able to remember where we are today and not make the same mistakes we made. Hopefully the country will be in a better shape by then. Who knows?
Are you optimistic about the future?
I am. Right now I am. Right now I think overall the province has a great future ahead of itself. I think the country has a good future ahead of itself. It's a bit of a bump we're going through right now. It's a bit of a turbulence, it's a bit of a turbulent ride with the country, but eventually we will pass the turbulence, and I think there are going to be good things happening in this country. I think we are going to advance to where we could. And same thing with the province. I'm very hopeful with this province as well. I think we have a great government in place for that as well. And I know you're not endorsing it nor denouncing it, but I could say that.
Unfortunately, I don't have a say in this. I'm an international student. Okay, this is a great. I came up with a great question now. What do you have to tell to the youth that has just immigrated to Canada and resonates more with Canada as a home, but yet is not able to really contribute to the political system? First of all, what's your opinion about whether this is going to be a rude question, but how do you think they can make their voice count as the residents of Canada and hopefully be able to contribute as a Canadian at some point?
I mean, I was a permanent resident for like 3 years before I became a citizen here. And one thing to note when you come to Canada is, this was my experience, is your opportunities are almost unlimited if you put your mind into it. Now, that sounds very cliche, I understand that. But I think we have a very welcoming community in Alberta, across Canada for that. Now, of course, to contribute to a community, you don't need to, right off the bat, be involved politically. I wasn't involved politically, since I immigrated here, right? My initiation was, I volunteered for what was called the Open Door Society in Saskatoon. Their job was to kind of help out newcomers with English lessons, social events, etc. And I was a volunteer for what was called a conversation circle for them before I even ever got involved politically. And for me, it was a great experience because I got to do public speaking. But also, I really valued the work we did there because we would have, let's say, it was me and around me was 6-7 people from different countries, different backgrounds, different English proficiencies. And all we did was just chat. And it meant a lot for me because I always love meeting people with different perspectives. And you definitely get a lot different perspectives when you interact with people from different countries. But it was also important for them. Like, you could see that they appreciated the idea that in Canada, you can have all these backgrounds come together and still manage to have a conversation. And the reason why I recommend to newcomers to really get involved with the community is that, yes, right now, as a newcomer, it's tough. You miss home. It's really cold here sometimes. But if you give back to this community, let's say, if you just start giving back to the community, not just the community who exists here, but the newcomer community. Let's say you're here for 3 months and you're giving back to the guy who just landed. Eventually, you're going to give the inspiration to that guy to also give back. And this repeats a cycle. Because for many, I would say, newcomers in Canada, they feel alone. They feel like all they've got is them and their own group of people, right? And it's important to reinforce that, but also to make sure that there is an understanding that, hey, there's a lot to do out there. And I would say get engaged with your community. There are so many things you can do, volunteer. And eventually, you'll be able to vote. When you're a PR, you'll be able to buy a party membership if you're interested. I believe so, at least. Don't quote me on that. You can go door knocking still. You don't have to be, let's say, a citizen to do that. There was a fellow who just came to Canada like 2 months ago when I was door knocking the provincial election. And he was like, yeah, I came from China and I hate communists and I want to do door knocking. And I said, hey, you know what? Fair enough. Let's go do some door knocking. And so I had to give him an explanation on who everyone is and how we do this. I said, we just go there, ask for support. And even though he couldn't vote, he's still engaged in the community, preparing to be fully involved politically later on, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Man, the world is a small place. I used to work for the Open Door Association.
Is that in Saskatchewan?
I worked for their Camrose constituency.
Oh,
yes.
See? The world's a small place. Yes. You give back and you'll find each other.
Still not part of the Conservative Party, by the way.
He'll join us later.
We'll see. Okay. Thanks, Matt. I really, really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
It was a lovely, lovely conversation. I hope to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, man.